The Nevada Territory, 1876, where men measured worth in silver veins and family names, where fortunes rose and fell like the desert sun, and where appearances meant everything until they meant nothing at all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mountains of Nevada stood ancient and unyielding against the twilight sky, their peaks slashed, with veins of precious metal that had transformed a lawless expanse into a land of opportunity and greed. The Blackwell silver mine was the crown jewel of the territory, 20 shafts burrowing deep into the Sierra Nevada mountains, 400 workers, and one man whose name inspired both fear and respect wherever it was spoken. Maxwell Blackwell. The early evening wind carried dust and whispers across the mining town of Silverton as Maxwell's stallion thundered down the main street, its hooves striking sparks against the hard-packed earth. Men stepped aside, touching the brims of their hats in deference. Women paused their conversations, eyes following the commanding figure astride the midnight black horse. At 45, Maxwell Blackwell had the kind of presence that silenced rooms and emptied streets, not from charm, but from the cold authority that radiated from him like heat from a forge. The Blackwell estate sprawled across the northern ridge overlooking the town, a testament to silver profits and relentless ambition. The main house rose 3 stories high, with gleaming windows and a wraparound porch that caught the last golden rays of the setting sun. As Maxwell dismounted, handing the reins to a waiting stable hand, his son stepped out onto the porch. Nathan Blackwell stood in his father's shadow, literally and figuratively. At 28, he had his father's height and strong jaw, but his mother's thoughtful eyes and quiet dignity. He watched his father approach, noting the tension in the older man's shoulders, the tightness around his mouth that spoke of difficult decisions and unwelcome news. "Father?" Nathan said with a slight nod. "Didn't expect you back until tomorrow." Maxwell removed his riding gloves with sharp, precise movements. "Plans change. We need to talk." The study was Maxwell's domain, a sanctuary of leather-bound books, maps of mining claims, and the lingering scent of expensive cigars. A massive desk of polished oak dominated the space, covered with ledgers and contracts. Maxwell didn't sit. Instead, he poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal tumbler and took a long drink before facing his son. "The Henderson claim is failing," Maxwell said without preamble. "3rd dry shaft this month." Nathan's brow furrowed. "That can't be right. The geological survey showed surveys lie. Numbers don't." Maxwell slid a ledger across the desk. "We're hemorrhaging money, and the banknotes are coming due." Nathan scanned the figures, the reality of their situation sinking in like a stone in still water. "We can reduce the workforce, cut back operations until—" "No!" Maxwell's voice was sharp as a pickaxe striking stone. "Blackwells don't retreat, we expand." "With what capital?" Nathan asked, keeping his voice level despite the frustration building. "In his chest. Unless you've found another vein you haven't told me about." A smile that wasn't quite a smile crossed Maxwell's face. "Better, I've found a solution." From his jacket, Maxwell withdrew an envelope sealed with wax and placed it on the desk between them. Nathan made no move to take it. "What is this?" "Your future," Maxwell replied, "and the future of everything we've built." Nathan's fingers felt strangely numb as he broke the seal and unfolded the document inside. Legal language, formal and binding, swam before his eyes until the purpose of the contract became clear. A marriage contract? Nathan looked up, disbelief etched across his features. To whom? Eleanor Walsh. The name hung in the air like smoke, familiar, yet unexpected. Nathan searched his memory. The Walsh family had owned a moderately successful silver mine in the Eastern Valley before a cave-in. 3 years ago had claimed the life of Harold Walsh, leaving his widow and daughter to manage their dwindling fortunes. The Walsh claim still has silver, Maxwell continued, reading Nathan's thoughts. Their last survey showed a promising new vein, but they lack the capital and manpower to excavate it properly. With our equipment and their silver, he trailed. Off the calculation evident. And the daughter? Nathan asked, his voice carefully neutral. What do we know of her? Maxwell waved a dismissive hand. She's of age, educated back east, keeps to herself since returning after her father's death, runs the business affairs competently enough. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. Maxwell's eyes hardened. This isn't about courtship or sentiment, Nathan. This is business. This is survival. Nathan placed the contract back on the desk, fighting to keep his breathing steady. And if I refuse? Maxwell didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window, gazing out at the empire he had built through sheer force of will. The mine shafts visible in the distance, the smelters, the town that existed because he had decreed it should. Then you choose to watch everything. I've built everything that will be yours, crumble into dust. He turned back to face his son. Is your pride worth that price? The silence stretched between them, taut as a mining cable. When? Nathan finally asked. Saturday. Judge Wilson will perform the ceremony here. Maxwell added, almost as an afterthought. The mother insisted on a small family affair. Apparently the girl is shy. Something in his father's tone made Nathan look up sharply. What aren't you telling me? Maxwell sighed, a rare show of hesitation. There are rumors about the Walsh girl, nothing of consequence to our arrangement. What kind of rumors? The kind that explain why she hasn't been seen in Silverton society since her return. Maxwell's expression was impassive. They say she bears a birthmark, quite extensive, according to gossip, covers half her face, likely exaggerated, but explains her reclusiveness. Nathan felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. So, I'm to marry a stranger with a disfigurement because our latest shaft came up dry. You're to marry an heiress to secure our future. Maxwell corrected, his patience visibly thinning. Her appearance is immaterial to the arrangement. Need I remind you that marriages of convenience have built empires for centuries? Your mother and I had a partnership, Nathan interrupted, based on respect, if not love. And you can have the same, Maxwell said. Beauty fades. Silver endures. Later that night, Nathan stood on the balcony outside his bedroom, watching the distant lights of lanterns as the night shift workers descended into the mines. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. His mind raced with thoughts of Eleanor Walsh, a woman he had never met, whose face he had never seen, who would soon be tied to him by law, if not by choice. What kind of woman was she? Did she resent this arrangement as much as he did? Or was she perhaps grateful for the security it offered? The questions multiplied, unanswerable and persistent. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Hannah, the housekeeper who had helped raise him after his mother's death 10 years ago, entered with a tray of coffee. Thought you might need this, she said, setting the tray on his desk. Your father told me the news. Nathan smiled wryly. News travels fast. In this house, like lightning. Hannah's lined face was sympathetic but practical. It's not what you wanted. No, Nathan admitted. It's not. Hannah poured the coffee, adding the splash of whiskey she knew he preferred on difficult nights. I knew Eleanor's mother before they moved east after Harold's passing. Honorable people, the Walshes. And Eleanor? Nathan couldn't help asking. What do you know of her? Hannah's eyes grew distant with memory. Sweet child, intelligent, used to follow her father around the mine office, asking questions about every detail. Had a gift for numbers, even young. And her Nathan hesitated, searching for a delicate phrasing. The rumors about her appearance. Hannah's expression tightened. Gossip is rarely kind, especially to women. Yes, she has a birthmark, but marks on skin don't reflect marks on character. Nathan nodded, accepting both the coffee and the gentle rebuke. Thank you, Hannah. After she left, Nathan returned to the balcony, coffee in hand. Tomorrow, he would ride to the neighboring town of Pinecrest, where Eleanor and her mother now lived in reduced circumstances. Propriety demanded at least one meeting before the ceremony, though the outcome was already decided. The night spread. Out before him, vast and uncompromising as his father's ambition, somewhere miles away, he wondered if Eleanor Walsh was similarly sleepless, similarly trapped by circumstance and duty. Dawn broke harsh and clear over the Nevada mountains as Nathan readied his horse for the journey to Pinecrest. The town lay 15 miles east, nestled in a narrow valley, where the Walsh mine had once been one of the most promising operations before tragedy struck. "Remember your manners," Maxwell said as Nathan mounted his horse. It wasn't concern in the older man's voice, but calculation. "The agreement is favorable, but not yet signed. We need the Walsh woman's cooperation." Nathan nodded curtly. "I know how to conduct business, Father." "This isn't just business," Maxwell replied. "It's your future, our future." The ride to Pinecrest gave Nathan time to order his thoughts. His initial anger had cooled into a resigned determination. He was his father's son, after all. Pragmatic when necessary, strategic always. If this marriage would secure the Blackwell legacy, then he would approach it as he did every challenge, with clear eyes and careful planning. Pinecrest was smaller than Silverton, less prosperous but somehow more authentic. Without the dominating presence of a single successful mine, it had developed a more diverse economy, small farms, a lumber mill, shops that served the surrounding ranches. The Walsh residence stood on the outskirts, a modest but well-maintained two-story house with a small garden that seemed out of place in the harsh landscape. Nathan was expected. A maid showed him into a parlor furnished with pieces that spoke of better days, quality furniture brought from the east, now slightly worn but still elegant. The room was cool and dim, curtains drawn against the morning sun, creating an atmosphere of quiet dignity. Victoria Walsh entered first, a woman in her 50s with silver threading through her dark hair and a posture that spoke of resilience. In the face of hardship, her greeting was polite but reserved. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, extending her hand, "you're punctual, a quality I appreciate." "Mrs. Walsh." Nathan bowed slightly. "Thank you for receiving me. Please, sit." She gestured to a chair across from the settee. "My daughter will join us." Shortly, an awkward silence descended. Nathan searched for an appropriate opening. "I was sorry to hear of your husband's passing," he finally said. "My father spoke highly of his expertise." A fleeting expression crossed Victoria's face. Surprise, perhaps, or skepticism. Did he? They were more often competitors than allies. "As I recall, business and respect are not mutually exclusive," Nathan replied. Victoria studied him with shrewd eyes. "No, they are not, though they are often sacrificed on the altar of profit." Before Nathan could respond, the parlor door opened. Again, he rose automatically, turning to face the woman who would soon be his wife. Eleanor Walsh entered the room like someone accustomed to being noticed, but not seen, quietly, efficiently, with purpose, but without flourish. She was of average height, slender but not fragile, dressed in a simple blue dress that spoke of practicality rather than fashion. Her dark hair was swept up in a no-nonsense style, revealing the clean lines of her jaw and neck, and then there was what had not been exaggerated by rumor. The birthmark that spread across the right side of her face from temple to jawline, a deep red-purple stain that nature had painted without permission. It was not subtle. It could not be ignored or overlooked. Nathan realized he was staring and immediately redirected his gaze to her eyes, clear, intelligent brown eyes that met his directly, without shame or apology, but with a wariness that suggested she was accustomed to being an object of curiosity. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, her voice surprisingly melodious and self-possessed. "I believe you're here to inspect your investment." Victoria made a small sound of disapproval. "Eleanor." "Forgive me, Mother," Eleanor said without looking away from Nathan. "I meant no disrespect. I simply prefer clarity in business matters." "As do I," Nathan found himself saying, "though I had hoped we might become acquainted as people before discussing terms." A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. "How diplomatic of you." "Very well, Mr. Blackwell. What would you like to know about the woman you've agreed to marry, sight unseen?" The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. This was not a woman crushed by circumstance or desperate for rescue. This was someone who had faced her reflection every morning and chosen to define herself beyond what others saw. "Everything you're willing to share," Nathan replied honestly. "I find I know surprisingly little about the person who will soon share my name." Eleanor sat beside her mother, arranging her skirts with practiced precision. "I was educated at Miss Porter's school in Connecticut. I read 3 languages. I managed my father's accounts before his death and have maintained our remaining interests. Since, I prefer coffee to tea, sunrise to sunset, and directness to pretense." She paused, then added, "Your turn, Mr. Blackwell." Despite himself, Nathan felt a smile tug at his lips. "I was educated at Yale. I speak only English, I'm afraid, though I can curse in Chinese thanks to our mine workers. I've worked alongside my father since I was 16. I prefer whiskey to brandy, mountains to valleys, and honesty to diplomacy." "Well," Victoria said after a moment, "at least you'll have interesting conversations." The tension in the room eased slightly. Tea was served, and the discussion turned to practical matters. The details of the ceremony, the joining of the mining operations, the logistics of Eleanor and her mother relocating to the Blackwell estate. Throughout the conversation, Nathan found his attention repeatedly drawn to Eleanor. She spoke with clarity and intelligence about mining operations, market fluctuations, and extraction techniques. There was no self-pity in her manner, no suggestion that she considered herself diminished by her circumstances or appearance. "The Walsh mine has a new vein that appears promising," Eleanor explained, spreading a survey map on the table between them. "Our preliminary samples show high-grade ore, possibly the richest in the claim. But we lack the equipment and manpower to excavate safely. And with the Blackwell resources," Nathan continued, studying the map, "we could have it operational within months." "Precisely." Eleanor met his gaze directly. "A beneficial arrangement for both parties." "Indeed." Nathan found himself curious about her thoughts beyond the business at hand. "And what of the personal arrangement, Miss Walsh? Does that concern you at all?" Eleanor's expression remained composed, but something flickered in her eyes, caution perhaps, or assessment. "Marriage is a practical institution, Mr. Blackwell," she said carefully. "Throughout history, it has served economic and social purposes more often than romantic ones. I have no illusions about why this match has been proposed, nor any expectation beyond mutual respect and cooperation." Her answer was perfect, reasonable, mature, exactly what the situation called for. Yet Nathan sensed something beneath the practiced words, a depth of feeling carefully contained. "And if I wished for more than cooperation," he found himself asking. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Such as?" "Honesty, friendship perhaps in time." A small smile touched her lips, genuine this time. "Honesty I can promise immediately. Friendship? That would depend on what kind of man you prove to be. As Nathan prepared to leave, Eleanor walked with him to the door while her mother remained in the parlor, giving them a moment of relative privacy. "One more question, if I may," Nathan said, pausing at the threshold. "Are you entering this arrangement willingly, Miss Walsh? Truly?" Eleanor considered him for a long moment, as if weighing not just her answer but his worthiness to receive her honesty. "My options are limited," she finally said. "My mother and I survive on what remains of my father's investments, which dwindle. Monthly, the mine could save us, but we cannot develop it alone." She straightened her shoulders slightly. "So yes, I enter this arrangement willingly, with clear eyes, and without resentment. The question is, Mr. Blackwell, do you?" Nathan was struck by her perception, her ability to see beyond social niceties to the heart of the matter. "My father has built his life around the Blackwell legacy," he said slowly. "He sees this marriage as its salvation." "That's not what I asked." Nathan met her steady gaze. "I entered this arrangement because I understand duty and responsibility. Whether I do so willingly," he paused. "Let's say I do so with an open mind." Eleanor nodded, accepting his honesty without judgment. "Saturday, then?" "Saturday," he agreed, placing his hat on his head and stepping into the bright afternoon light. As he rode back towards Silverton, Nathan found his thoughts returning again and again to Eleanor Walsh. He had expected to meet a woman diminished by her circumstances, either bitter about her fate or pathetically grateful for the security his name offered. Instead, he had found someone with a clear-eyed understanding of her situation and the courage to face it without illusion. The birthmark, so striking at first glance, had somehow receded in his awareness as she spoke, as her intelligence and composure came to the fore. By the end of their meeting, he had found himself responding not to her appearance, but to her person, to the mind behind those direct brown eyes. What kind of marriage could they build on such a foundation? Not love, perhaps, but something potentially more enduring: respect, partnership, possibly even friendship. It was more than many marriages could claim, arranged or otherwise. As Silverton appeared on the horizon, Nathan realized that while his future had been decided without his consent, the shape of that future might still hold surprises. Eleanor Walsh was not what he had expected. And that, he decided, might be the one blessing in this business arrangement that now defined both their lives. The day of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, the Nevada sky stretching endless and blue above the Blackwell estate. Inside the main house, servants bustled about with final preparations, arranging chairs in the garden, polishing silver that would gleam under the afternoon sun. The ceremony would be small, a necessity explained away as dignified restraint rather than what it truly was: a hasty business transaction dressed in wedding clothes. Nathan stood at his bedroom window, watching the activity below with a detached curiosity, as if observing a play in which he had been unexpectedly cast. His wedding suit hung ready, charcoal grey, with a silver waistcoat custom-made in San Francisco and delivered by express coach just yesterday. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Thomas Riley, his foreman and closest friend, entered, without waiting for permission, a liberty earned through years of shared work and mutual respect. "Quite a day," Thomas said, leaning against the doorframe. At 35, he had the weathered face of a man who had spent his life under open skies, and the shrewd eyes of someone who saw more than he said. "Never thought I'd see you corralled." Nathan gave a short laugh. "Nor I, yet here we are." Thomas studied with his friend. "How bad is it? The mine, I mean. Bad enough that my father is willing to broker his only son a new claim." Nathan turned from the window. "The Henderson shaft is dry. The Clayton vein is thinning, without new silver," He left the sentence unfinished. "And the bride?" Thomas asked carefully. "You met her?" Nathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "She's not what I expected." "The birthmark?" "Is exactly as rumored," Nathan confirmed. "But that's not what I meant." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Waiting. She has a mind," Nathan said simply. "Sharp, practical, runs their business affairs with more skill than half the men in the territory could manage. Doesn't simper or apologize for her circumstances." "Sounds promising," Thomas offered. "For a partnership, at least. Perhaps?" Nathan straightened his shoulders. "What's certain is that by sundown, I'll be a married man, and the Blackwell Walsh. Silver operation will begin consolidation." Meanwhile, in the guest suite at the opposite end of the house, Eleanor Walsh sat motionless as her mother secured the last pearl pin in her wedding dress. The room was silent save for the occasional direction. "Turn slightly, hold still," as Victoria Walsh worked with the precision of a woman accustomed to managing difficult situations with grace. Eleanor's wedding dress was elegant but understated. Pearl grey silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, its high neckline and long sleeves both fashionable and convenient for a woman accustomed to covering as much skin as propriety allowed. A small pearl pendant, her grandmother's, rested at her throat. "There," Victoria said, stepping back to survey her handiwork. "You look beautiful, Eleanor." Eleanor glanced at her reflection in the mirror, taking in the careful arrangement of her dark hair, the modest gown, and the birthmark that no elegant styling could disguise. The port wine stain swept across her right cheek from temple to jaw, a permanent reminder of how fate marked some people from birth. "I look appropriate," she corrected gently. "And that will have to suffice." Victoria's expression softened. "You've always been more than your reflection, my dear. Intelligence, character. These are what matter in a lifetime together." "We both know this isn't about a lifetime together, Mother," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "This is about silver, survival, and pragmatism. Mr. Blackwell needs our claim. We need his capital and equipment. The arrangement is sensible." "He seemed decent," Victoria offered. "More thoughtful than his father, certainly." A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. "Faint praise considering Maxwell Blackwell's reputation." "Eleanor," Victoria said, her tone sharpening slightly, "remember what's at stake. The Blackwells can restore what we've lost. Security, position, I know exactly what's at stake." Eleanor interrupted, rising from the vanity chair. "I've calculated it down to the last penny and the last ounce of ore. I agreed to this marriage with my eyes open, Mother. You needn't worry that I'll jeopardize it with unrealistic expectations." Victoria studied her daughter, concern and pride mingling in her expression. "No one would blame you for hoping for more than a business arrangement. Nathan Blackwell is not unattractive, and you're still young." "Mother," Eleanor said firmly, "please don't. I've made my peace with what I am and what I can expect from life. I don't need pretty illusions." A soft knock at the door prevented further discussion. The maid entered, announcing that it was time. Maxwell Blackwell had requested a brief meeting with Eleanor before the ceremony. Eleanor nodded, smoothing her skirts with practiced hands. "Send word that I'll join him in the library in 5 minutes." When the maid departed, Victoria stepped forward, adjusting Eleanor's pendant with anxious fingers. "Remember, he's a hard man, but not an unreasonable one. Be respectful, but not subservient. Know how to handle men like Maxwell Blackwell," Eleanor said calmly. "I watched Father navigate his type for years. The Blackwell Library was a testament to wealth acquired rather than knowledge pursued. Leather-bound volumes arranged by color and size rather than subject, their pristine spines suggesting they were purchased by the yard rather than read with care." Maxwell Blackwell stood before the massive fireplace, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, despite the early hour. He turned as Eleanor entered, his gaze sweeping over her with the assessing eye of a man calculating value. If the birthmark surprised or disturbed him, He gave no indication. "Miss Walsh," he said with a slight nod. "Thank you for indulging my request." "Mr. Blackwell," Eleanor replied, remaining near the door. "You wish to speak with me?" "Indeed." He gestured to a chair, but Eleanor remained standing. After a moment he continued, "I believe in clear understanding before entering into contracts. Makes for fewer complications later." "A sensible approach," Eleanor agreed. "What clarification do you require?" Maxwell set down his glass with deliberate precision. "My son seems to have developed a certain regard for your capabilities. He speaks highly of your business acumen." "That's gratifying to hear." "It is unexpected," Maxwell corrected. "Nathan has always been somewhat idealistic, sees potential where I see practicality." Eleanor's expression remained composed, though she felt a flicker of wariness. "And you find this problematic?" "I find it important to establish expectations," Maxwell said. "This marriage serves a purpose: to combine our operations, salvage our investments, and preserve the Blackwell legacy. Nothing more." "I assure you, Mr. Blackwell," Eleanor replied evenly, "I harbor no romantic delusions about this arrangement. It is, as you say, a business matter." Something like approval flickered in Maxwell's cold eyes. "Good. Then we understand each other." "Not entirely," Eleanor said, her voice calm but firm. "While I recognize the nature of this union, I expect to be treated with the respect my position as your son's wife and business partner warrants. I will manage the combined ledgers, oversee the integration of our operations, and speak when I have something worthwhile to contribute." Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're rather direct for a young woman." "I find it saves time," Eleanor replied. "And in business, time is capital." For a moment, tension hung in the air between them. The old power assessing the new, the patriarch measuring the unexpected addition to his carefully controlled world. Then, surprisingly, Maxwell Blackwell laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of real humor, but containing a measure of genuine respect. "Harold Walsh raised no fool," he said, almost to himself. "Very well, Miss Walsh. Respect is earned, and you've made a promising start, Eleanor." Nathan's voice came from the doorway, where he stood in his wedding attire, expression tightly controlled. The tension in his jaw suggested he had heard at least part of the exchange. His eyes moved from his father to his bride-to-be, a question in their depths. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly," Eleanor assured him with remarkable composure. "Your father and I were establishing a mutual understanding." Maxwell picked up his whiskey again. "Indeed. I find your future wife refreshingly pragmatic, Nathan." "Perhaps there's more to this arrangement than I initially calculated." Nathan's gaze remained on Eleanor. "I believe we established that when we met." A clock somewhere in the house chimed the hour. Maxwell straightened. Business once again at the forefront. Time for positions. Judge Wilson doesn't appreciate tardiness, even from me. As Maxwell departed, Nathan remained in the doorway, his eyes still on Eleanor. "Did he upset you?" The question surprised her. Not just its content, but the genuine concern behind it. "No," she answered honestly. "Your father is exactly what I expected, clear in his priorities, direct in his methods." "He can be ruthless," Nathan said, choosing his words carefully, "particularly when it comes to the family legacy." "Most successful men are ruthless, Mr. Blackwell," Eleanor replied. "My father included. The difference lies in where they draw their lines." Nathan studied her face, not avoiding the birthmark as many did, but not fixating on it either. Instead, he seemed to be searching for something deeper, something behind her careful composure. "And where do you draw yours?" he asked quietly. Eleanor hadn't expected the question, nor the sincere interest it conveyed. For a brief moment, her practiced poise wavered. "I believe in fair exchanges," she said finally. "I don't expect what I haven't earned, and I don't give what isn't deserved." "A straightforward philosophy," Nathan observed. "I'm a straightforward woman, Mr. Blackwell." Something like a smile touched his lips. "Nathan," he corrected gently, "if we're to be married in less than an hour, perhaps we should use our given names." Eleanor nodded, the smallest acknowledgement. "Nathan, then." He offered his arm with unexpected formality. "Shall we proceed to our positions, Eleanor? It seems we have a wedding to attend." The garden of the Blackwell estate had been transformed for the occasion, not with excessive decoration, but with the kind of tasteful elegance that spoke of wealth confident enough to appear understated. Chairs arranged in neat rows faced a small pavilion where Judge Wilson waited, his judicial robes exchanged for formal attire befitting his role as officiant. The guests were a few, key investors in the Blackwell operation, the town banker, and his wife, the mayor, Thomas Riley, representing the mine workers, and a handful of local merchants whose prosperity depended on the silver that flowed from the Blackwell mine. Notably absent were the usual wedding guests, no childhood friends, no extended family, no one who attended for any reason except business interest or social obligation. Victoria Walsh sat in the front row, her posture rigid with dignity despite her reduced circumstances. Beside her, conspicuously empty, was the seat that would have been Harold Walsh's, the father who would not walk his daughter down the aisle. Maxwell Blackwell stood to one side of the pavilion, overseeing the proceedings with the air of a man conducting a merger rather than witnessing a marriage. His satisfaction was evident, not joy for his son, but the completion of a necessary transaction. At precisely 2:00, Nathan took his position before the judge. A moment later, music from a hired string quartet signaled Eleanor's approach. She walked alone down the makeshift aisle, her steps measured and graceful, her eyes fixed forward. The guests' reactions varied but were telling. Some managed polite neutrality, others couldn't hide their momentary shock at the birthmark visible, even from a distance. Still others exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their assessment of Nathan Blackwell's fate. Nathan, however, watched her approach with an expression that revealed nothing except perhaps a quiet admiration for her composure. When she reached him, he extended his hand, not by rote, but with a deliberate gentleness that seemed to say, "I see you." Eleanor placed her hand in his, and together they faced Judge Wilson. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, no flowery declarations of eternal devotion, no romantic verses, just the legal language necessary to bind two people and their fortunes together. When asked if they took each other in matrimony, both Nathan and Eleanor spoke their affirmations clearly, without hesitation, but also without particular emotion. "The rings, please," Judge Wilson intoned. Thomas Riley stepped forward, producing a small velvet box that he handed to Nathan. From it, Nathan withdrew a wedding band, simple but elegant, a band of polished silver set with a small diamond. As he slipped it onto Eleanor's finger, he said quietly, "With this ring, I pledge my honor and partnership." Not love, not devotion, but something they could both honestly promise. Eleanor, in turn, placed a plain silver band on Nathan's finger, a ring that had belonged to her father, resized for her new husband. "With this ring, I pledge my loyalty and respect." Judge Wilson pronounced them husband and wife with the same tone he might use to declare a property deed valid. Nathan hesitated only briefly before leaning forward to place a chaste kiss on Eleanor's cheek, deliberately choosing the side marked by nature's hand. The gesture, small but significant, did not go unnoticed by the assembled guests, nor did it escape Eleanor, whose eyes widened slightly in surprise before her composure returned. The reception that followed was modest by Blackwell standards, A luncheon served on the terrace, champagne flowing freely enough to suggest prosperity. Without ostentation, the guests circulated, offering congratulations that sounded more like business endorsements than genuine well-wishes. A shrewd move, the banker murmured to Maxwell. The Walsh claim was undervalued. With your equipment and manpower, the market looks favorable for the next quarter, another investor added, if you can extract from the new vein quickly enough. Through it all, Nathan and Eleanor moved as a unit, accepting congratulations with polite gratitude, answering questions about their plans with careful coordination. To casual observers, they might have appeared like any other newly married couple, perhaps not passionately in love, but certainly compatible and aligned in purpose. Only Victoria Walsh, watching from a quiet corner of the terrace, noted the careful distance they maintained, the precise space between them, never too close, never too far, a choreography of respect rather than intimacy. As the afternoon waned and the guests began to depart, Nathan found himself standing beside his new wife at the garden's edge, momentarily isolated from the others. "You've handled this admirably," he said quietly. "Not everyone could maintain such dignity under such scrutiny." Eleanor's gaze remained on the distant mountains. "I've had a lifetime of scrutiny, Nathan. You developed certain skills." "I imagine so." He hesitated, then added, "I want you to know that I intend to honor our agreement in every respect. You will have my support, my protection, and my respect." Now she did turn to look at him, her expression questioning. "Is that unusual? To honor one's agreements?" "Unfortunately, yes," Nathan replied, "especially in marriages of convenience. But I believe that what begins as necessity can grow into something worthwhile, given time and mutual effort." Eleanor studied him, searching for insincerity or condescension, and finding neither. "That's a surprisingly optimistic view." "I'm told it's my greatest flaw," Nathan said with the hint of a smile, "seeing potential where others see only what is." Before Eleanor could respond, Maxwell approached, his expression indicating business rather than celebration. "The Walsh equipment inventory has arrived. We should review it before making decisions about integration." Just like that, the wedding day transformed back into a business day. Nathan nodded, his expression shifting from husband to heir apparent. "Of course, Eleanor should join us. Her knowledge of their operation will be invaluable." Maxwell's gaze flicked to Eleanor, assessing once more. "Very well. The study. 15 minutes. As he walked away, Eleanor turned to Nathan with a raised eyebrow. "Already putting me to work, husband? I assumed you'd prefer it to sitting with the remaining guests discussing table linens and flower arrangements," Nathan replied. A genuine smile, small but real, touched Eleanor's lips. A correct assumption. The rest of the wedding day passed in a blur of ledgers, equipment manifests, and operational planning. By nightfall, the new Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell had established the framework for merging their mining operations, allocated resources for immediate exploration of the Walsh claim's promising vein, and determined staffing needs for the expanded enterprise. It was, by any business standard, a productive day. By any romantic standard, it was perhaps the least sentimental wedding day in Nevada Territory history. As evening fell, the awkwardness that had been held at bay by business matters finally descended. The Blackwell mansion had been prepared for. The newlyweds, Eleanor's belongings moved to the East Wing suite, connected to Nathan's rooms by a discreet sitting area. The arrangement offered both proximity and privacy, a compromise between marital expectations and practical reality. Eleanor stood in her new rooms, taking inventory of the space that would now be hers. The furnishings were expensive, but impersonal. No one had bothered to inquire about her preferences or tastes. Like everything else in this arrangement, the accommodations were adequate, appropriate, and devoid of sentiment. A soft knock at the connecting door interrupted her thoughts. Nathan entered at her acknowledgement, still dressed in his wedding clothes, though he had removed his jacket and loosened his collar. "I wanted to ensure you have everything you need," he said, remaining near the doorway as if uncertain of his. "Welcome. The rooms are more than satisfactory," Eleanor replied. "Your housekeeper has been most accommodating." Silence stretched between them, not comfortable, but not entirely uncomfortable either, just the awkward reality of two strangers, bound by law but not by choice. "Tomorrow," Nathan said finally, "I thought you might like to tour the mine operations, see firsthand what we're working with before we implement the integration plan." Eleanor nodded, grateful for the return to practical matters. "That would be helpful. I've reviewed the production reports, but seeing the actual operation will provide better context." Another silence, longer this time. "Eleanor," Nathan began, then paused as if searching for the right words. "I want you to know that I understand the unusual nature of our situation. I don't expect—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "You don't expect a true marriage," Eleanor finished for him, her voice steady. "I understand, Nathan. I didn't enter this arrangement with romantic illusions." Relief flickered across his features, followed by something more complex. "I was going to say that I don't expect an immediate adjustment. This is a significant change for both of us, and I believe we should allow ourselves time to acclimate." "A sensible approach," Eleanor agreed. Nathan nodded, studying her face in the lamplight. "We've made a promising start today. The operational plan is sound. With proper execution, the combined enterprise should thrive." "Yes," Eleanor said, "the business aspects are clear enough, and the personal aspects will develop as they may," Nathan added, his tone careful. "With time and mutual respect." Eleanor met his gaze directly. "I believe we've established a foundation of respect, at least. The rest, as you say, will develop as it may." Nathan inclined his head slightly, accepting her assessment. "Then I bid you good night, Eleanor. Sleep well." "Good night, Nathan." After he had gone, Eleanor moved to the window, gazing out at the silver-tinged landscape beyond. The moon cast long shadows across the grounds of what was now her home, a place she had entered not by choice, but by necessity, bound to a man she barely knew by vows that promised partnership without passion. Yet as she touched the wedding band on her finger, Eleanor felt something unexpected. Not happiness exactly, but perhaps possibility. Nathan Blackwell was not what she had feared. He looked at her birthmark without flinching or pitying. He valued her mind and respected her capabilities. He had kissed her marked cheek before witnesses, a public declaration that he accepted what others rejected. It was not love, it was not even the beginning of love, but it was perhaps the foundation for something neither of them had dared to hope for, a marriage of equals, built on something more substantial than fleeting attraction or financial necessity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the reality of their business partnership, the scrutiny of the community, the continuing calculation of Maxwell Blackwell. But tonight, in the quiet of her new rooms, Eleanor allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps, just perhaps, fate had been kinder than she dared to believe. The morning after the wedding dawned bright and harsh, sunlight streaming through the windows of Eleanor's new bedchamber with uncompromising clarity. She had been awake for hours already, reviewing ledgers and production reports by lamplight, preparing for the mine tour Nathan had proposed. When a knock came at her door, she was already dressed in a practical navy skirt and white blouse, her hair pinned severely away from her face. "Enter," she called, closing the ledger on her desk. It was Hannah, the Blackwell housekeeper, carrying a breakfast tray. The older woman hesitated briefly upon seeing Eleanor already dressed and working, then smiled with quiet approval. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwell. I've brought your breakfast." The name, Mrs. Blackwell, sounded foreign to Eleanor's ears. She had been Miss Walsh for 26 years, daughter of Harold Walsh, keeper of her family's dwindling legacy. Now, overnight, she had become Mrs. Blackwell, mistress of this imposing house, wife to a man she barely knew. "Thank you, Hannah," Eleanor said, gesturing to a small table near the window, "and please call me Eleanor." Hannah set down the tray with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Nathan asked me to inform you that he'll meet you in the stables at 9, if that suits. The mine is a fair ride from the house." "That will be fine," Eleanor replied, noting with interest the way Hannah referred to her employer as Mr. Nathan, a small but telling indication of her long service and familiar position in the household. Hannah lingered, arranging things on the tray with unnecessary precision. "If I might say, Miss Eleanor, it's good to have a lady in the house again. It's been 10 years since the senior Mrs. Blackwell passed." Eleanor acknowledged this with a slight nod. "I understand you've been with the Blackwells for many years." "Since Mr. Nathan was a boy," Hannah confirmed, "raised him after his mother died, more or less." She hesitated, then added with quiet emphasis, "He's a good man. Different from his father?" The statement hung in the air, not quite an assurance, not quite a plea, but something in between. Eleanor studied the older woman, recognizing an ally, offering subtle guidance. "I'm beginning to see that," Eleanor replied carefully. Satisfied, Hannah moved toward the door. "The blue riding habit in your wardrobe might be suitable for today's outing. Mrs. Blackwell, the late Mrs. Blackwell, had it made for dusty days at the mine." After the housekeeper departed, Eleanor ate sparingly, her mind already focusing on the day ahead. The mention of the previous Mrs. Blackwell sparked curiosity. What kind of woman had been Maxwell Blackwell's wife? What kind of mother had raised Nathan to be the seemingly decent man who had emerged from beneath his father's stern influence? At precisely 9 o'clock, Eleanor arrived at the stables to find Nathan checking the cinches on 2 saddled horses, his own black stallion and a sturdy chestnut mare with intelligent eyes. "Good morning," he said, turning at the sound of her approach. "I see Hannah found you riding clothes." Eleanor nodded, adjusting the fitted jacket of the blue habit. "Yes, though I brought my own as well. Your mother must have been—" She paused, unsure how to phrase it. "About your height," Nathan supplied, "though perhaps not quite as—" He gestured vaguely, then caught himself. "Practical. My mother preferred side saddles and formal riding attire, even for mine visits." "I prefer to ride astride," Eleanor said, approaching the chestnut mare and offering her palm for inspection. "Especially on uneven terrain. It seems safer and more sensible." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise, but he nodded. "I'll have Thomas saddle her properly, then." A quick adjustment later, they were mounted and riding away from the estate, Eleanor sitting astride like a man, her skirts arranged modestly but practically for the journey. Nathan shot her an appraising glance as they settled into a comfortable pace side by side. "You ride well," he observed. "Most Eastern-educated ladies I've met prefer carriages." "My father believed in practical skills," Eleanor replied. "He said, silver doesn't care if you're wearing lace or leather. It only responds to proper handling." A smile tugged at the corner of Nathan's mouth. Sound philosophy. The Walsh mine was well run under his management, innovative even in some of its approaches. "He was ahead of his time in many ways," Eleanor agreed, something softening in her expression. "He implemented safety measures most operations considered extravagant, said that men were harder to replace than machinery." "A perspective my father doesn't share," Nathan said dryly, "though I've tried to institute similar practices where I can." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the landscape opening around them, sage-dotted hills, giving way to rockier terrain as they approached the mining operations. In the distance, the silhouette of derricks and processing structures rose against the sky, industrial monuments to man's pursuit of the Earth's hidden wealth. Eleanor observed it all with keen interest, mentally comparing the scope of the Blackwell operation to what she remembered of her father's more modest enterprise. The differences were stark. Where the Walsh mine had employed perhaps 50 men at its peak, the Blackwell operation clearly supported hundreds. The processing facilities alone dwarfed anything her father had built. Impressive, she acknowledged, as they created a rise overlooking the main complex. 15 years of aggressive expansion, Nathan explained. My father doesn't believe in moderation when it comes to extracting wealth from the earth. Something in his tone caught Eleanor's attention. You don't entirely approve. It wasn't a question, and Nathan didn't treat it as one. I believe in sustainable growth, he said after a moment. Extraction that allows for future development rather than exhausting every vein as quickly as possible. A long-term perspective, Eleanor noted, uncommon in the industry. Perhaps that's why we're facing difficulties now, Nathan said, guiding his horse down the slope toward the mine entrance. The richest veins have been stripped, and we haven't developed enough secondary sources to maintain production levels. At the mine entrance, they were greeted by Thomas Riley, who had ridden ahead to prepare for their visit. The foreman's weathered face creased in a smile as he helped Eleanor dismount. Welcome to the heart of the Blackwell Empire, Mrs. Blackwell, he said, his informal manner suggesting he and Nathan shared a friendship that transcended employer and employee. Though I expect you're no stranger to mine operations. Thank you, Mr. Riley, Eleanor replied. And no, this isn't unfamiliar territory, though your operation is considerably larger than my father's was. Call me Thomas, please, he said, then turned to Nathan. Everything's ready for the inspection. Jackson is waiting to walk you through the new extraction plan for the eastern shaft. The next hours were a revelation, not for the mining operations themselves, which Eleanor understood fundamentally from her years at her father's side, but for the way Nathan Blackwell conducted himself as a mine owner. Where Maxwell ruled through intimidation and distance, Nathan led through respect and engagement. He knew the workers by name, inquired after families, listened to concerns with genuine attention. More surprising still was the way Nathan included Eleanor in every discussion, deferring to her expertise on geological questions, introducing her not as his wife, but as his partner in the enterprise. The workers' initial skepticism, both at her gender and her marked appearance, gave way to cautious respect as she demonstrated knowledge and asked incisive questions. By midday, they had toured the primary shafts, inspected the processing facilities, and reviewed the extraction plans for the coming month. As they paused for a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and coffee in the mine office, Eleanor found herself unexpectedly energized by the morning's activities. Your operation is impressive, she said, accepting the tin cup of coffee Thomas offered. Though I see several areas where integration with the Walsh claim could improve efficiency. Such as? Nathan asked, leaning against the rough wooden desk, his posture relaxed but attentive. Eleanor set down her cup and moved to the large map, pinned to the wall. The Walsh property borders yours here, along this ridge, she said, tracing the boundary with her finger. Father's last surveys suggested the Carson vein doesn't end at the property line as previously thought. Instead, it likely curves, running beneath both claims in a horseshoe pattern. Nathan joined her at the map, studying the area she indicated. If that's accurate, we could access it from both sides, significantly reducing extraction time. Precisely, Eleanor agreed. And since the Walsh side has better drainage and a more stable rock composition, it might be more efficient to focus the primary extraction efforts there, even though the Blackwell side could yield faster initial results. Thomas let out a low whistle. Long-term thinking over short-term gains. Maxwell won't like that approach. Eleanor glanced at Nathan, noting the slight tightening of his jaw at the mention of his father's preferences. It's a sound mining strategy, she said firmly, "and ultimately more profitable." "I agree," Nathan said, his eyes still on the map. "We'll begin surveys immediately to confirm the vein pattern. Thomas, can you reassign Wilson's team to this?" As they continued discussing operational details, Eleanor became aware of a subtle shift in the dynamic between them. What had begun as a marriage of financial necessity was evolving, unexpectedly, into a genuine partnership of compatible minds. Nathan listened to her suggestions without condescension, built upon her ideas with his own insights, and together they crafted plans that neither might have developed independently. It was not intimacy, not yet, but it was a kind of connection she hadn't anticipated. The satisfaction of being truly heard and valued for her mind, rather than judged for her appearance or dismissed for her gender. Their return to the Blackwell estate late that afternoon coincided with the arrival of a carriage bearing the county's most prominent socialite, Margaret Thornton, and her daughter, Sophia. As Nathan and Eleanor dismounted in the courtyard, still dusty from their day at the mines, Mrs. Thornton emerged from her carriage with the determined air of a general advancing into battle. "Nathan Blackwell," she called, waving her hand imperiously. "We've come to pay our respects to your new bride. Though I must say, we expected to find her at home, not—" Her gaze swept over Eleanor's practical riding habit and dust-streaked appearance, disapproval evident in every line of her face. "Mrs. Thornton," Nathan replied with stiff courtesy. "How kind of you to call. Allow me to present my wife, Eleanor Blackwell." Eleanor stepped forward, acutely aware of her disheveled state, but refusing to be diminished by it. "Mrs. Thornton, Miss Thornton, please excuse our appearance. We've just returned from touring the mine operations." Margaret Thornton's eyebrows rose toward her elaborate coiffure. "The mine? On your first day of marriage? How unusual." Behind her mother, Sophia Thornton, a pretty, fair-haired young woman of perhaps 20, watched the exchange with poorly concealed curiosity, her eyes lingering on Eleanor's birthmark with the fascination of someone viewing an exotic creature. "My wife has considerable expertise in mining operations," Nathan said, his voice taking on a protective edge that surprised Eleanor. "Her insights are invaluable to our enterprise." "Indeed." Mrs. Thornton's tone suggested she found this claim dubious at best. "Well, perhaps next time you might consider your wife's position in society, Nathan. A lady's reputation is built on propriety, not commercial activities." Eleanor felt Nathan tense beside her and placed a restraining hand on his arm. "I appreciate your concern for my reputation, Mrs. Thornton," she said smoothly. "But I find fulfillment in contributing to the family business. Now, won't you come inside? Hannah will have refreshments ready, and I'd be delighted to hear the latest news from town." The next hour in the Blackwell parlor was an exercise in social warfare disguised as polite conversation. Margaret Thornton, clearly disappointed to find Eleanor articulate and composed, despite her marked appearance, launched a series of subtle attacks disguised as helpful advice. "Of course you'll want to redecorate," she said, glancing around the parlor with critical eyes. "The late Mrs. Blackwell had exquisite taste, but everything appears rather dated now. I'd be happy to introduce you to my seamstress as well. She's quite skilled at designing gowns that create flattering silhouettes." The implication was clear. Eleanor needed all the help she could get to appear presentable in her new role. Before Eleanor could respond, Sophia Thornton leaned forward with manufactured sympathy. "It must be so difficult," she said in a stage whisper, "having to adjust to being seen after living so privately for so long." Eleanor maintained her composure, years of enduring similar comments having forged an armor of dignity around her. "Actually, Miss Thornton, I find transparency quite refreshing, in business and in social matters." Nathan, who had remained largely silent during the exchange, suddenly stood. "If you'll excuse us, Mrs. Thornton, my wife and I have matters to discuss before dinner. The new shaft alignment requires immediate attention." The dismissal was polite, but firm. After the Thorntons had departed with promises to include Eleanor in the next ladies' auxiliary meeting, Nathan turned to her with an expression of mingled admiration and concern. "I apologize for that ambush," he said. "Margaret Thornton is a dedicated collector of gossip and dispenser of judgment." Eleanor shook her head slightly. "No need for apologies. Women like Mrs. Thornton exist in every social circle. They patrol the boundaries of acceptability and extract payment in the form of deference from those they deem less fortunate." Nathan studied her for a moment. "You handled her beautifully. Most new arrivals to Silverton society crumble under her scrutiny." "Years of practice," Eleanor said simply. Then, with a hint of humor, "Besides, I suspect she was more disappointed to find you married than to find me marked." Nathan looked startled, then thoughtful. "Sophia has been paraded before every eligible bachelor in the territory. I hadn't considered that might include me." "A silver baron's son." "Unquestionably." Eleanor removed her riding gloves, her practical nature reasserting itself. "Now, about that shaft alignment. I've been considering an alternative approach that might reduce the initial investment while increasing long-term yield." The abrupt shift from social warfare to business strategy seemed to amuse Nathan. "You truly are remarkable," he said, the words escaping him almost involuntarily. Eleanor glanced up, surprised by the genuine admiration in his voice. For a moment, they regarded each other with new awareness, not as reluctant partners in an arranged marriage, but as allies who had unexpectedly discovered mutual respect. The moment passed as Hannah entered to announce dinner, but something had shifted between them, a foundation laid not on romantic notions or physical attraction, but on the more enduring ground of intellectual compatibility and shared purpose. That evening, in the privacy of her rooms, Eleanor sat at her dressing table, removing the pins from her hair. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was the same one she had seen every day of her life. The same dark eyes, the same determined mouth, the same vivid birthmark staining her skin. Yet something felt different, as if the woman behind the reflection had changed in some fundamental way. For the first time in years, she had spent an entire day being valued for her mind rather than judged for her appearance. Nathan Blackwell, contrary to all expectations, had treated her as a partner rather than an acquisition. He had defended her capabilities to others, included her in meaningful work, and listened to her ideas with genuine interest. It was not love. Eleanor was far too practical to indulge in such fanciful notions, but it was respect, perhaps even the beginning of friendship. And for a woman who had long ago resigned herself to a life defined by limitations rather than possibilities, that unexpected development was both bewildering and quietly thrilling. As she prepared for bed, Eleanor's thoughts turned to the days ahead. Tomorrow, they would begin integration of the Walsh equipment and personnel into the Blackwell operation. The work would be challenging, the resistance from some quarters inevitable. Maxwell Blackwell would undoubtedly scrutinize her every decision, looking for weaknesses to exploit or mistakes to criticize. Yet for the first time since her father's death, Eleanor felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. The Blackwell-Walsh mining operation offered a chance to implement innovations her father had only dreamed of, to create something lasting and valuable. And in Nathan, she had found an unexpected ally, someone who saw beyond the birthmark. To the woman beneath. As she extinguished the lamp beside her bed, Eleanor allowed herself a small, private smile. Perhaps this arrangement, born of necessity rather than choice, might yield unexpected treasures after all. like the hidden silver veins that ran beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered by those patient enough to look beyond the obvious. 3 weeks into their marriage, a rhythm had established itself at the Blackwell estate. Each morning, Eleanor and Nathan would breakfast together in the small sunroom, reviewing the previous day's reports and planning their priorities. By 8 o'clock, they would ride to the mines together, spending their days overseeing the integration of the Walsh and Blackwell operations. The work was challenging but rewarding. As Eleanor had predicted, the Carson vein did indeed curve beneath both properties, offering rich deposits that could sustain production for years if properly managed. Under her guidance, the account books were restructured, bringing greater clarity to the operation's finances. Meanwhile, Nathan focused on implementing improved safety measures throughout the expanded enterprise. To the surprise of many and the consternation of some, they worked well together. Eleanor's meticulous attention to detail complemented Nathan's broader vision. Her knowledge of geology enhanced his understanding of engineering. Together, they formed a partnership that was beginning to earn grudging respect even from Maxwell Blackwell, who had taken to observing their progress with calculating eyes. On this particular morning, however, that rhythm was disrupted. As Eleanor entered the sunroom for breakfast, she found not Nathan but Maxwell waiting for her, a cup of coffee in one hand and the morning newspaper in the other. "Eleanor," he acknowledged with a brief nod. "Sit. We need to discuss some matters." Eleanor took her usual chair, maintaining her composure despite the unexpected confrontation. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. Is Nathan joining us?" "He's at the north shaft. There was an issue with the new support beams." Maxwell folded his newspaper with precise movements, "which leaves us an opportunity to speak frankly." Eleanor poured herself coffee, using the moment to prepare for whatever challenge Maxwell intended to present. "I always prefer frankness to ambiguity." Maxwell studied her with the same assessing gaze he might give a promising but unproven silver vein. "The integration of operations is proceeding more efficiently than I anticipated. Production reports are encouraging. The men seem to accept your involvement despite its unusual nature." "Thank you," Eleanor said, recognizing that from Maxwell Blackwell this constituted high praise. "It wasn't a compliment," Maxwell clarified. "It was an observation. One that prompts a question. What exactly are your ambitions here, Eleanor?" The directness of the inquiry didn't surprise her. Maxwell had never been one for subtlety. "My ambitions are straightforward," she replied. "To ensure the continued success of the Blackwell-Walsh enterprise, to honor my father's legacy through sound business practices, to fulfill my role as Nathan's wife in all aspects that matter." Maxwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "And beyond that, there are whispers in town that you've begun attending the Mine Owners Association meetings, that you've spoken about modernizing extraction methods, implementing new safety protocols. These are not traditional concerns for a mine owner's wife." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "The world is changing, Mr. Blackwell. Mining must change with it. Safer conditions mean fewer accidents, which mean consistent production and lower costs from litigation and lost time." "You sound like Nathan," Maxwell said, disapproval evident in his tone. "Perhaps because we share similar perspectives on effective management," Eleanor replied. Maxwell leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "Let me be clear, Eleanor. I accepted this marriage as a necessary business arrangement. I respect your knowledge of your father's operation, but the Blackwell enterprise has succeeded for 15 years under my leadership with methods I have proven effective. Methods that left 3 shafts dry and the company facing financial crisis," Eleanor pointed out quietly. The color rose in Maxwell's face, but he controlled his reaction with the discipline of a man accustomed to hard negotiations. "Watch yourself, Eleanor. Remember your position here. I remember it clearly, she said, her voice level, as Nathan's wife and business partner, as co-owner of a significant silver claim that saved the Blackwell operation from potential ruin, as someone with expertise and insight valuable to our shared enterprise. For a long moment they regarded each other across the table, the old, power and the new, measuring boundaries and testing resolve. Then surprisingly Maxwell smiled, not warmly, but with a certain reluctant respect. Harold Walsh raised a formidable daughter, he said, but remember this, formidable women have fallen before. Tread carefully. With that cryptic warning he rose and departed, leaving Eleanor alone, with her cooling coffee and the unsettling awareness that she had just established herself as more than an accessory to the Blackwell empire. She had declared herself a player in her own right. Later that morning, Eleanor rode to the mines alone, her mind still processing the confrontation with Maxwell. The implications of his warning troubled her not because she feared him, but because she recognized the potential for conflict between father and son if Maxwell perceived her influence over Nathan as a threat. At the main office, she found Thomas Riley reviewing maps with several foremen. The men fell silent as she entered, their expressions varying from discomfort to curiosity to outright hostility. "Mrs. Blackwell," Thomas greeted her. "We weren't expecting you today." "Clearly," Eleanor replied dryly. "Please, continue your discussion. I'm here to review the extraction reports from yesterday's shift." The men exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that Eleanor couldn't quite decipher. Finally, one of the older foremen, Jackson, she recalled, a 20-year veteran of the Blackwell operation, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we're discussing technical matters, mining issues." "How fortunate, then, that I understand mining," Eleanor replied evenly, "unless there's something specific you're concerned about sharing with me." Another uncomfortable silence fell. Thomas shot her an apologetic look before addressing the group. "Mrs. Blackwell grew up in the industry, gentlemen. Her father was Harold Walsh, and she managed his books and operations for years. She knows what she's about." Jackson frowned, skepticism etched in the lines of his weathered face. "It's not about knowing books, Riley. It's about knowing men. The crew in Shaft 5 is getting restless about these new safety protocols. Takes longer to set up the reinforced supports, cuts into their quotas. They're saying it's costing them wages." Eleanor moved to the map table, studying the layout of Shaft 5. "The new protocols add approximately 45 minutes to set up time, but reduce collapse risk by 60%. Last month's accident in the Henderson mine killed 3 men and shut down production for a week. Which costs more, 45 minutes of setup or a week of lost extraction?" Her practical assessment seemed to take Jackson by surprise. He blinked, then nodded reluctantly. "Put that way, it makes sense. But the men don't always think that far ahead. They see today's pay packet, not next month's risk." "Then we adjust the compensation structure," Eleanor said, inspiration striking. "Implement a safety bonus. Teams that properly follow the new protocols without incident receive a monthly premium. It rewards caution rather than punishing it." Thomas Riley's eyes lit with interest. "That could work. The safety improvements would offset the bonus costs within a quarter if we prevent even one major incident." Jackson still looked skeptical but less hostile. "The men might go for that, but will Maxwell Blackwell? He's not one for spending extra on wages." "Leave Maxwell to me," came Nathan's voice from the doorway. He entered, removing his gloves, a streak of dust across his cheek from the morning's work at the North Shaft. "Eleanor's right. We can't afford another accident like Henderson, and we can't afford to lose good men to operations with safer conditions." His gaze met Eleanor's across the room, a look of approval, partnership, and something warmer that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "I see you've been solving problems without me," he said with a small smile. "Just proposing solutions," Eleanor corrected. Implementation will require your authority. Our authority, Nathan amended, turning to the assembled foreman. My wife's insights are proving invaluable to this operation, gentlemen. I suggest we all benefit from her expertise rather than resisting it out of habit or prejudice. The directness of his statement hung in the air, challenging years of tradition and preconception. After a moment, Jackson nodded, offering Eleanor a grudging but genuine tip of his hat. Fair enough, Mr. Blackwell. We'll draft the new bonus structure this afternoon, Mrs. Blackwell, if you'd care to review it. The meeting dispersed, leaving Eleanor and Nathan alone in the office. He moved to the window, watching the men return to their various duties across the bustling mine yard. I overheard part of that exchange, he said. You handled it well. Experience, Eleanor replied. I faced similar resistance at my father's operation after his death. Men who respected him still couldn't bring themselves to take direction from his daughter. Nathan turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. Yet here you are, winning over the most stubborn crew in the Nevada territory, including apparently my father. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. What makes you think I've won over Maxwell? He mentioned at breakfast that you had unexpected competence, Nathan said with a faint smile. From him, that's practically a glowing endorsement. Eleanor hesitated, then decided on honesty. Your father and I had a different sort of conversation at breakfast. He seemed concerned about my influence on operational decisions. A shadow crossed Nathan's face. Did he threaten you? Not explicitly, Eleanor assured him. More of a warning to remember my place. Your place, Nathan repeated, a hint of anger in his voice. As if being born female and bearing a birthmark somehow diminishes your intelligence or capability. The vehemence of his defense surprised Eleanor. Over the past weeks, Nathan had consistently shown her respect, but this was something more. Indignation on her behalf, a protective instinct that suggested he valued her beyond her usefulness to the business. Thank you, she said simply, but I've faced worse than your father's disapproval. What concerns me is creating conflict between you. Nathan's expression softened. My father and I have never seen eye to eye on management philosophy. Long before you arrived, we disagreed on everything from worker safety to resource allocation. Your presence hasn't created conflict, it's merely highlighted what was already there. He moved closer, his voice lowering slightly. What you have done, Eleanor, is provide me with an ally I never expected to find. Someone who understands both the business and my vision for its future. The sincerity in his eyes made Eleanor acutely aware of his proximity, of the subtle shift that had been occurring between them over these weeks of working side by side. What had begun as a marriage of convenience, a business arrangement endorsed by signatures rather than sentiment, had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared goals, and growing affection. Before either could acknowledge this unspoken transformation, a commotion outside drew their attention. Shouts echoed across the mine yard, urgent and alarmed. Nathan moved to the window, then swore under his breath. Fire, he said tersely. The processing shed. They rushed outside to find chaos unfolding. Thick black smoke billowed from the timber structure where raw ore was sorted before smelting. Men ran in all directions, some toward the blaze with buckets, others away from the growing danger. The wind, picking up strength as the day advanced, pushed flames and sparks dangerously close to the main storage shed where blasting powder was kept. "Water Brigade!" Nathan shouted, his voice cutting through the confusion. "Riley, get those barrels moved. Jackson, clear the storage shed." Without hesitation, Eleanor joined the effort, gathering men into an organized line to pass buckets from the water tank to the spreading flames. If the fire reached the blasting supplies, the resulting explosion could destroy half the operation and claim countless lives. "Mrs. Blackwell, you shouldn't be here," one of the miners protested as she took position in the waterline. "It's not safe for a lady." "It's not safe for anyone," Eleanor replied, passing a heavy bucket with practiced hands, "which is why every person matters. Now work, don't argue." For the next hour, they battled the blaze together. Mine owner and workers, management and laborers, united by common purpose and shared danger. Eleanor worked alongside the men, her fine clothes soon soaked and smudged, her marked face streaked with soot and sweat. No one questioned her presence now. Competence in crisis transcended gender and appearance. Nathan moved through the chaos with calm authority, directing efforts, adjusting strategy as the wind shifted, ensuring no man took unnecessary risks. Twice, Eleanor saw him rush into smoke-filled areas to help injured workers to safety, his own welfare secondary to the lives under his protection. This, she realized, was the true measure of the man she had married, not his family name or his business acumen, but his character revealed under pressure, his willingness to stand with his men rather than command from a distance. When the flames were finally subdued and the immediate danger passed, exhaustion overtook excitement. Workers slumped to the ground, coughing and spent. The processing shed was a charred skeleton, but the vital equipment had been saved, and more importantly, no lives had been lost. Eleanor stood apart, catching her breath, surveying the damage. With a practical eye already calculating repair costs and production delays, she didn't hear Nathan approach until he spoke beside her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough from smoke. She turned to find him regarding her with concern, his face blackened with soot, a small burn visible on his forearm where his sleeve had rolled back. Without thinking, she reached for his injured arm. "You're hurt," she said, examining the burn with gentle fingers. "It's nothing." Nathan dismissed, though he didn't pull away from her touch. "You shouldn't have been in the middle of this, Eleanor. If anything had happened to you, the same could be said of you," she interrupted. "Yet here we both are, unharmed except for minor injuries and damaged clothing." She managed a small smile. "Though I fear this dress is beyond salvation." Nathan's gaze traveled over her bedraggled appearance, the once fine blue riding habit, now smoke-damaged and water-stained, her carefully arranged hair fallen loose around her shoulders, her face smudged with soot that couldn't disguise the birthmark, but somehow made it less conspicuous, part of a larger pattern of shadow and light. "I've never seen anyone more beautiful," he said quietly. The words hung between them, unexpected and transformative. Eleanor froze, searching his face for signs of mockery or pity and finding only sincerity. No one, not even her father in his most affectionate moments, had ever called her beautiful. The word had been so definitively removed from the vocabulary used to describe her that its sudden appearance left her speechless. Before she could formulate a response, Thomas Riley approached with urgent news about the fire's suspected cause, breaking the moment but not its significance. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity, documenting damage, reassigning workers, establishing temporary processing arrangements to minimize production disruption. Through it all, Eleanor was acutely aware of Nathan's presence, of the subtle changes in how he looked at her, how he stood slightly closer than business required, and how his hand occasionally brushed hers as they reviewed recovery plans. Something had shifted between them, a barrier falling away to reveal possibility where once there had been only pragmatism. As dusk approached and they prepared to ride back to the estate, Nathan helped Eleanor mount her horse with a newly apparent tenderness. His hands lingered at her waist slightly longer than necessary, his eyes meeting hers with unspoken questions. Quite a day, he said simply. Indeed, Eleanor agreed, though perhaps valuable in unexpected ways. How so? She considered. Her answer carefully. Crisis reveals the truth, Nathan, about operations, about people, about ourselves. He nodded, understanding her meaning without requiring elaboration. And what truth did today reveal to you, Eleanor? The directness of his question demanded equal honesty in return. That this marriage of convenience has become... She paused, searching for the right word. Inconveniently complicated. A smile touched his lips, warming his eyes in the fading light. I find I don't mind the complication, he said softly, as they rode home side by side through the gathering dusk. Eleanor realized that the fire had burned away more than timber and equipment. It had consumed the careful distance they had maintained, the pretense that their relationship was merely a business arrangement. What would rise from those ashes remained to be seen, but for the first time since bearing her father's name alone, Eleanor felt something dangerous and wonderful unfurling within her heart. Hope. 2 days after the mine fire, Silverton buzzed with talk of the incident, and more significantly, of Eleanor Blackwell's unexpected role in the crisis. Stories circulated of how the marked woman had stood shoulder to shoulder with miners, passing water buckets with hands more accustomed to ledger books than manual labor. Some accounts exaggerated her contribution, others diminished it, but all acknowledged the same surprising fact. The woman with the birthmark had proven herself made of sterner stuff than anyone had anticipated. Our authority, Nathan amended, turning to the assembled foreman. My wife's insights are proving invaluable to this operation, gentlemen. I suggest we all benefit from her expertise rather than resisting it out of habit or prejudice. The directness of his statement hung in the air, challenging years of tradition and preconception. After a moment, Jackson nodded, offering Eleanor a grudging but genuine tip of his hat. Fair enough, Mr. Blackwell. We'll draft the new bonus structure this afternoon, Mrs. Blackwell, if you'd care to review it. The meeting dispersed, leaving Eleanor and Nathan alone in the office. He moved to the window, watching the men return to their various duties across the bustling mine yard. I overheard part of that exchange, he said. You handled it well. Experience, Eleanor replied. I faced similar resistance at my father's operation after his death. Men who respected him still couldn't bring themselves to take direction from his daughter. Nathan turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. Yet here you are, winning over the most stubborn crew in the Nevada territory, including apparently my father. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. What makes you think I've won over Maxwell? He mentioned at breakfast that you had unexpected competence, Nathan said with a faint smile. From him, that's practically a glowing endorsement. Eleanor hesitated, then decided on honesty. Your father and I had a different sort of conversation at breakfast. He seemed concerned about my influence on operational decisions. A shadow crossed Nathan's face. Did he threaten you? Not explicitly, Eleanor assured him. More of a warning to remember my place. Your place, Nathan repeated, a hint of anger in his voice. As if being born female and bearing a birthmark somehow diminishes your intelligence or capability. The vehemence of his defense surprised Eleanor. Over the past weeks, Nathan had consistently shown her respect, but this was something more. Indignation on her behalf, a protective instinct that suggested he valued her beyond her usefulness to the business. Thank you, she said simply, but I've faced worse than your father's disapproval. What concerns me is creating conflict between you. Nathan's expression softened. My father and I have never seen eye to eye on management philosophy. Long before, You arrived. We disagreed on everything from worker safety to resource allocation. Your presence hasn't created conflict, it's merely highlighted what was already there. He moved closer, his voice lowering slightly. What you have done, Eleanor, is provide me with an ally I never expected to find. Someone who understands both the business and my vision for its future. The sincerity in his eyes made Eleanor acutely aware of his proximity, of the subtle shift that had been occurring between them over these weeks of working side by side. What had begun as a marriage of convenience, a business arrangement endorsed by signatures rather than sentiment, had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared goals, and growing affection. Before either could acknowledge this unspoken transformation, a commotion outside drew their attention. Shouts echoed across the mineyard, urgent and alarmed. Nathan moved to the window, then swore under his breath. "Fire!" he said tersely. "The processing shed!" They rushed outside to find chaos unfolding. Thick black smoke billowed from the timber structure where raw ore was sorted before smelting. Men ran in all directions, some toward the blaze with buckets, others away from the growing danger. The wind, picking up strength as the day advanced, pushed flames and sparks dangerously close to the main storage shed where blasting powder was kept. "Water brigade!" Nathan shouted, his voice cutting through the confusion. "Riley, get those barrels moved. Jackson, clear the storage shed." Without hesitation, Eleanor joined the effort, gathering men into an organized line to pass buckets from the water tank to the spreading flames. If the fire reached the blasting supplies, the resulting explosion could destroy half the operation and claim countless lives. "Mrs. Blackwell, you shouldn't be here," one of the miners protested as she took position in the water line. "It's not safe for a lady." "It's not safe for anyone," Eleanor replied, passing a heavy bucket with practiced hands, "which is why every person matters. Now work, don't argue." For the next hour, they battled the blaze together. Mine owner and workers, management and laborers, united by common purpose and shared danger. Eleanor worked alongside the men, her fine clothes soon soaked and smudged, her marked face streaked with soot and sweat. No one questioned her presence now. Competence in crisis transcended gender and appearance. Nathan moved through the chaos with calm authority, directing efforts, adjusting strategy as the wind shifted, ensuring no man took unnecessary risks. Twice, Eleanor saw him rush into smoke-filled areas to help injured workers to safety, his own welfare secondary to the lives under his protection. This, she realized, was the true measure of the man she had married, not his family name or his business acumen, but his character revealed under pressure, his willingness to stand with his men rather than command from a distance. When the flames were finally subdued and the immediate danger passed, exhaustion overtook excitement. Workers slumped to the ground, coughing and spent. The processing shed was a charred skeleton, but the vital equipment had been saved, and more importantly, no lives had been lost. Eleanor stood apart, catching her breath, surveying the damage. With a practical eye already calculating repair costs and production delays, she didn't hear Nathan approach until he spoke beside her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough from smoke. She turned to find him regarding her with concern, his face blackened with soot, a small burn visible on his forearm where his sleeve had rolled back. Without thinking, she reached for his injured arm. "You're hurt," she said, examining the burn with gentle fingers. "It's nothing." Nathan dismissed, though he didn't pull away from her touch. "You shouldn't have been in the middle of this, Eleanor. If anything had happened to you, the same could be said of you," she interrupted. "Yet here we both are, unharmed except for minor injuries and damaged clothing." She managed a small smile. "Though I fear this dress is beyond salvation." Nathan's gaze traveled over her bedraggled appearance, the once fine blue riding habit, now smoke-damaged and water-stained, her carefully arranged hair fallen loose around her shoulders, her face smudged with soot that couldn't disguise the birthmark, but somehow made it less conspicuous, part of a larger pattern of shadow and light. "I've never seen anyone more beautiful," he said quietly. The words hung between them, unexpected and transformative. Eleanor froze, searching his face for signs of mockery or pity and finding only sincerity. No one, not even her father in his most affectionate moments, had ever called her beautiful. The word had been so definitively removed from the vocabulary used to describe her that its sudden appearance left her speechless. Before she could formulate a response, Thomas Riley approached with urgent news about the fire's suspected cause, breaking the moment but not its significance. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity, documenting damage, reassigning workers, establishing temporary processing arrangements to minimize production disruption. Through it all, Eleanor was acutely aware of Nathan's presence, of the subtle changes in how he looked at her, how he stood slightly closer than business required, and how his hand occasionally brushed hers as they reviewed recovery plans. Something had shifted between them, a barrier falling away to reveal possibility where once there had been only pragmatism. As dusk approached and they prepared to ride back to the estate, Nathan helped Eleanor mount her horse with a newly apparent tenderness. His hands lingered at her waist slightly longer than necessary, his eyes meeting hers with unspoken questions. "Quite a day," he said simply. "Indeed," Eleanor agreed, "though perhaps valuable in unexpected ways." "How so?" She considered, her answer carefully. "Crisis reveals the truth, Nathan, about operations, about people, about ourselves." He nodded, understanding her meaning without requiring elaboration. "And what truth did today reveal to you, Eleanor?" The directness of his question demanded equal honesty in return. "That this marriage of convenience has become—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Inconveniently complicated." A smile touched his lips, warming his eyes in the fading light. "I find I don't mind the complication," he said softly, as they rode home side by side through the gathering dusk. Eleanor realized that the fire had burned away more than timber and equipment. It had consumed the careful distance they had maintained, the pretense that their relationship was merely a business arrangement. What would rise from those ashes remained to be seen, but for the first time since bearing her father's name alone, Eleanor felt something dangerous and wonderful unfurling within her heart. Hope. 2 days after the mine fire, Silverton buzzed with talk of the incident, and more significantly, of Eleanor Blackwell's unexpected role in the crisis. Stories circulated of how the marked woman had stood shoulder to shoulder with miners, passing water buckets with hands more accustomed to ledger books than manual labor. Some accounts exaggerated her contribution, others diminished it, but all acknowledged the same surprising fact. The woman with the birthmark had proven herself made of sterner stuff than anyone had anticipated. "He arranged our marriage for business purposes, yes, but he doesn't control what exists between us now." He took her hand, his touch gentle but certain. "Unless you wish him to." Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, then back to Nathan's face. "I've spent my entire life defining myself by what others see when they look at me," she said slowly. "The birthmark made me different, marked, unsuitable. I accepted those judgments as truth. I never allowed myself to hope for more than tolerance, certainly never expected to find someone who could look at me and see beyond." "I see you, Eleanor," Nathan said simply, "all of you. Your brilliance, your courage, your determination. The birthmark is simply part of the remarkable woman you are, no more defining than the color of your hair or the shape of your hands. Tears pricked at Eleanor's eyes, not of sorrow but of release, as if a weight she had carried for so long was finally being lifted. "I'm afraid," she confessed, "not of you, but of hoping, of believing this could be real." "It is real," Nathan assured. "Her, whatever comes, whatever challenges we face, from my father, from the mine, from the town, what exists between us is real. And if you're willing, I'd like to discover where it might lead." In that moment, with the valley spread before them and Nathan's honest gaze upon her, Eleanor made her choice. Slowly, deliberately, she closed the distance between them and placed her hand against his cheek. "Yes," she said simply. The kiss that followed was gentle, tentative, not the passionate embrace of storybook lovers, but the careful, wandering connection of two people discovering unexpected joy. When they parted, something had transformed between them. The business-like marriage of convenience had become a true bond, fraught with complexity, but rich with possibility. The ride back to the estate was filled with quiet conversation, not about the mine or operations or finances, but about themselves. Nathan spoke of his mother, a gentle woman who had taught him to see beyond surface appearances to the character beneath. Eleanor shared memories of her father, whose unwavering belief in her capabilities had shaped her into the woman she had become. By the time they reached the estate, a sense of newfound partnership had settled between them, deeper than their business collaboration, more meaningful than their legal connection. It was the beginning of something neither had expected, but both now embraced. As they approached the house, however, reality intruded on their private understanding. Maxwell Blackwell's carriage stood in the courtyard, returning earlier than expected from Carson City. And beside it waited another vehicle, the ornate coach belonging to Margaret Thornton, whose presence never boded well. Nathan's expression darkened. "I wonder what brings Mrs. Thornton calling so early." "Nothing pleasant, I imagine," Eleanor replied, straightening her shoulders as if preparing for battle. Inside, they found an unexpected tableau in the main parlor. Maxwell Blackwell stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid, with barely controlled anger. Margaret Thornton sat primly on the settee, her daughter Sophia beside her, eyes downcast in a performance of distress. Victoria Walsh stood apart, her face tight with concern. "There you are," Maxwell said as they entered, his tone dangerously calm. "Mrs. Thornton has brought some concerning news." Margaret Thornton's gaze swept over Eleanor's riding habit and wind-tousled hair with calculated disapproval before settling on Nathan. "I felt it my Christian duty to inform your father of the disturbing rumors circulating in town, Nathan, about your wife's behavior during the mine fire." Nathan stiffened. Eleanor acted with courage and quick thinking. The entire operation benefited from her presence. "A lady has no business inserting herself into such dangerous masculine affairs," Margaret continued as if he hadn't spoken. "It's unseemly, inappropriate, and reflects poorly on the Blackwell name. To have your wife working alongside common miners, exposed to coarse language and behavior." "Mrs. Thornton," Eleanor interrupted, her voice level but firm, "I appreciate your concern for propriety. But in an emergency, social niceties become secondary to saving lives and livelihoods." Maxwell's cold gaze fixed on Eleanor. "It's not just the fire incident, though that was regrettable enough. You've been attending business meetings, giving orders to foremen, implementing policies without proper consultation. This goes beyond the parameters of our arrangement." "Our arrangement?" Nathan repeated, anger evident in his tone. "You mean the marriage you arranged to save the family business? The same business that Eleanor's expertise has helped stabilize and improve in just a few weeks?" Maxwell's jaw tightened. "Mind your tone, son. We have guests." We have interfering busybodies, Nathan corrected bluntly, earning a gasp of outrage from Margaret Thornton. Who has no business dictating how my wife contributes to our enterprise? Sophia. Thornton, who had remained silent until now, suddenly spoke up, her voice tremulous with manufactured emotion. Nathan, everyone knows you were forced into this situation. You needn't defend choices that weren't yours to make. She raised tear-filled eyes to his. There are those who would understand if you sought to rectify circumstances thrust upon you. The implication was clear and clearly orchestrated. Eleanor felt a chill of understanding. This wasn't merely about propriety or business protocols. This was an attempted coup, a coordinated effort by Maxwell and the Thorntons to drive a wedge between her and Nathan, to undermine the marriage before it could develop into something more significant than a business merger. She glanced at Nathan, wondering if he recognized the manipulation at play. His expression, thunderous and contemptuous, suggested he did. Sophia, he said coldly, I suggest you save your tears for someone gullible enough to believe them. My marriage is not a topic open for discussion or intervention. Maxwell stepped forward, authority radiating from his rigid posture. That's enough, Nathan. We will discuss this matter privately. Mrs. Thornton, perhaps you and your daughter would prefer to call another day when tempers have cooled. As the Thorntons were escorted out, their scheme in tatters but their malice undimmed, Eleanor felt the weight of what lay ahead. The confrontation had made clear what she and Nathan now faced, not merely societal prejudice against her appearance, but active opposition to their growing bond from those with power and influence. The battle lines had been drawn, and standing in that parlor, Eleanor realized that the true test of their newfound connection was just beginning. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 10 as Maxwell Blackwell closed the study door with decisive finality. The Thorntons had departed, their scheme in disarray, but the damage already done. Now father and son faced each other across the room like opposing generals, with Eleanor standing resolute beside Nathan. This has gone far enough, Maxwell began, his voice controlled but edged with steel. I arranged this marriage as a business solution, not as an opportunity for my son to be led astray from his responsibilities. Led astray? Nathan repeated incredulously. Eleanor has done nothing but strengthen our operation and improve our prospects. She has overstepped her position, Maxwell countered, interfering in management decisions, challenging established protocols, and now behaving like a common laborer during the fire. The Blackwell name stands for something in this territory, Nathan. Your wife's actions undermine that standing. Eleanor felt Nathan tense beside her, but placed a restraining hand on his arm. Mr. Blackwell, she said calmly, my contributions to the mine's operation have resulted in increased efficiency and improved safety. The financial reports confirm this. As for the fire, I acted as any responsible owner would, to protect our investment and our workers. Maxwell's cold gaze settled on her. You were brought into this family for your father's claim, nothing more. Your marked appearance was a compromise we accepted for the silver beneath your land. Remember your place, Eleanor. The cruel assessment hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor felt it seep into her lungs, the familiar suffocation of being reduced to her birthmark and her inheritance. For a moment, the old shame threatened to overwhelm her newfound confidence. Then Nathan stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. That's enough, father. You will not speak to my wife that way again. Your wife? Maxwell scoffed. A convenient legal arrangement that you suddenly treat as something sacrosanct. Don't think I haven't noticed how your priorities have shifted. The Thornton girl would have been a more suitable match, unmarked, from a respected family, properly deferential, and utterly without substance, Nathan finished. I didn't choose Eleanor initially, that's true, but I choose her now, freely and completely. The declaration stunned both Eleanor and Maxwell into momentary silence. Nathan continued, his resolve evident in every word. The Blackwell legacy isn't just about accumulating wealth and power, Father. It's about integrity, innovation, and treating people with dignity. Values Mother tried to instill in me before she died. Eleanor embodies those values. She sees beyond the surface to what matters. He turned to Eleanor, his expression softening, just as she taught me to do. Maxwell's face hardened. Sentiment has no place in business, Nathan. I raised you to be pragmatic, not romantic. You raised me to be like you, Nathan corrected, but I found a better way forward, with Eleanor beside me as a true partner, not merely a convenient addition to our balance sheet. The older man studied them both, calculation replacing anger in his gaze. I see, he said finally. And if I were to insist that you reconsider this attachment? If I were to remind you that the Blackwell holdings remain under my control until my death or retirement? Eleanor's heart sank. The threat was clear: conform to Maxwell's vision or face disinheritance. Everything they had worked for could be taken away with a single command. To her surprise, Nathan laughed, not bitterly, but with genuine liberation. Then I would build something new, he said simply. Eleanor's claim alone is promising enough to sustain us. And together, we could create an enterprise based on innovation rather than intimidation. The bold statement hung between father and son like a challenge and a declaration of independence. Maxwell's expression betrayed nothing, but a muscle twitched in his jaw, the only sign that Nathan's words had struck home. You would walk away from everything I've built? For her? For us, Nathan corrected. For the future we envision together. But I'd prefer to build on what exists, to transform the Blackwell operation into something that honors its history while embracing new possibilities. Eleanor watched the complex emotions play across Maxwell's face: anger, disbelief, and something that might have been reluctant respect. After a long moment, the older man moved to the desk and poured himself a measure of whiskey. You're more like your mother than I realized, he said finally, his back still turned. She too had inconvenient principles. She had wisdom, Nathan replied quietly. Something I've only recently begun to appreciate. Maxwell turned, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I'll be in Carson City for the next 3 days, meeting with the Territorial Banking Commission. When I return, I expect a comprehensive proposal for this new vision of yours. His gaze shifted to Eleanor. From both of you. If it makes business sense, perhaps we can reach an accommodation. It wasn't acceptance, not quite, but it was an opening, narrow and conditional, but real. After Maxwell departed for his room, Eleanor released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was unexpected, she said. Nathan took her hands in his. He's a businessman above all. Give him time to calculate the advantages, and he'll eventually reconcile himself to the situation. He searched her face. Are you all right? What he said about your birthmark? Eleanor felt a wave of tenderness for this man who defended her so fiercely. I've heard worse, she said honestly. Though I admit it still stings to be reduced to my appearance, even after all these years. Nathan's expression darkened. Your birthmark is the least interesting thing about you, Eleanor. I wish you could see yourself as I see you. A thought formed in Eleanor's mind then, a possibility both terrifying and liberating. Perhaps it's time I did, she said slowly. Nathan looked puzzled. What do you mean? Tomorrow, Eleanor promised. For now, we have a proposal to prepare if we want to convince your father that our partnership is sound business as well as something more personal. They worked late into the night side by side at the study desk, drafting plans for a modernized Blackwell Walsh mining enterprise. Their vision combined Eleanor's meticulous attention to detail with Nathan's broader strategic thinking, safety innovations that would actually increase productivity, investment in more efficient extraction technologies, and a pioneering profit-sharing program that would give workers a stake in the operation's success. By dawn, they had created something that represented not just a business plan, but a declaration of shared values, a blueprint for the future they hoped to build together. As the age's first light of morning filtered through the study windows, Eleanor set down her pen and turned to Nathan. "There's something I need to do today," she said. "Something important. Will you trust me?" Nathan's expression was one of perfect confidence. "Always." Later that morning, as Nathan attended to urgent business at the mine, Eleanor sat alone in her bedchamber, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror. The birthmark that had defined her life stared back, the deep burgundy stain spreading across her right cheek from temple to jaw, a permanent marker of difference that had shaped how the world perceived her and how she perceived herself. Victoria. Walsh entered quietly, responding to her daughter's earlier summons. She observed Eleanor's contemplative posture and sat beside her on the vanity bench. "You seem troubled," Victoria said gently. Eleanor continued to study her reflection. "Not troubled," she corrected, resolute. "Mother, do you remember Dr. Harmon's suggestion years ago in Boston?" Victoria's expression tightened. "The cosmetic compound. Eleanor, we discussed this. The risks of skin damage were significant," Eleanor finished. "But that was 7 years ago. Medicine advances." She turned to face her mother directly. "I've corresponded with a physician in San Francisco who has developed a new formulation, zinc oxide-based, with calamine and other natural ingredients. It's been used successfully by actresses and women with various skin conditions." "You want to conceal the birthmark?" Victoria asked carefully, studying her daughter's expression. "Not permanently," Eleanor clarified. "Just, I want to know what it feels like to walk through the world unmarked, even if just for a day." She hesitated, then added softly, "To see myself as Nathan sees me." Understanding dawned in Victoria's eyes. "This isn't about shame anymore, is it? It's about choice." Eleanor nodded. "For the first time in my life, I've found someone who values me completely, birthmark and all, but I've never had the freedom to choose how I present myself to the world. The birthmark has always chosen for me." Victoria considered this, then nodded slowly. "I believe I still have the formula in my correspondence, and Hannah mentioned there's a skilled chemist in town who might be able to prepare it properly." "Then, you'll help me?" Eleanor asked, a note of surprise in her voice. "Eleanor," Victoria said gently, "all I've ever wanted is for you to feel free, to live without the constraints others would place on you because of something as meaningless as a mark on your skin. If this gives you that freedom, even temporarily, how could I object?" The preparation took most of the day. A discreet visit to the town chemist, careful mixing of the zinc compound, and several practice applications on Eleanor's arm to ensure no adverse reaction. By late afternoon, mother and daughter were ready. Victoria closed the bedroom door securely and laid out the materials on the vanity, a small pot of the flesh-toned paste, fine brushes, and a setting powder to prevent smudging. "Are you certain about this?" she asked one final time. Eleanor nodded, her resolve firm. "Yes." With gentle, precise movements, Victoria began to apply the compound to Eleanor's cheek. The process was painstaking. Layer upon thin layer, each one allowed to dry before the next was added, gradually building coverage that matched Eleanor's natural skin tone. The zinc oxide provided opacity, while other ingredients ensured the paste flexed naturally with facial movements. Nearly an hour later, Victoria set down the brush and stepped back, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Eleanor." Eleanor turned to face the mirror, and for a moment couldn't speak. The woman looking back at her was Herself, and yet not herself. Her features were the same, the thoughtful brown eyes, the determined mouth, the straight nose. But the birthmark that had been her most defining characteristic was invisible, concealed beneath the carefully applied compound. "I look," she began, but couldn't find the words to continue. "You look exactly as you are," Victoria said, softly, beautiful. Eleanor studied her reflection, turning her face to different angles, watching how the light played across her now uniform complexion. Strange emotions washed through her. Not joy exactly, nor sorrow, but something more complex. This was how the world might have treated her had she been born unmarked. This was the face that might have opened doors that had remained firmly closed, yet it was still her face, her eyes, her expressions, her essence. The birthmark had never defined her, she realized with sudden clarity. She had allowed it to define her. "What will you do now?" Victoria asked. Eleanor rose from the vanity, decision crystallizing. "I'm going to town," she said. "There's someone I need to see." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Silverton's main street as Eleanor's carriage stopped before the town's busiest establishment, the Silver Palace Hotel. Inside, the weekly meeting of the town's elite was underway. Mine owners, bankers and merchants gathering for drinks and deals in the exclusive atmosphere of the hotel's private lounge. Eleanor paused at the entrance, gathering her courage. Then, head high, she entered. The conversation stuttered to a halt as heads turned to observe the newcomer. Eleanor recognized the faces. Many had attended her wedding, others she knew from business dealings, but none seemed to immediately recognize her. She saw confusion in their expressions, followed by dawning realization as they identified her not by her birthmark, but by her bearing and attire. Margaret Thornton, holding court near the fireplace, was the first to speak. "Mrs. Blackwell, is that you?" Eleanor approached with measured steps, conscious of every eye upon her. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Thornton. I thought I might join the gathering today as both a resident of Silverton and a mine owner." Discomfort rippled through the assembled group. Women who had previously avoided Eleanor's company now found themselves uncertain how to respond to her transformed appearance. Men who had dismissed her as Maxwell's marked daughter-in-law reassessed their judgments in the face of her confident beauty. "Well," Margaret said, recovering her composure, "this is certainly unexpected. We weren't aware you had found a way to address your condition." "My birthmark, you mean?" Eleanor said plainly, refusing to adopt euphemisms. "Yes, I've discovered it can be temporarily concealed with the right compounds. Quite effective, wouldn't you agree?" A murmur of agreement circulated, accompanied by speculative glances and whispered comments. Eleanor accepted a offered drink and moved through the gathering with deliberate grace, engaging in conversations about mine production, silver prices, and community matters with knowledge that surprised many who had underestimated her. Throughout it all, she observed the subtle shift in how people responded to her, the increased attention to her words, the respectful tones, the absence of the pitying glances she had endured throughout her life. It was educational, illuminating, and ultimately hollow. These people, who now smiled and listened, were the same ones who had dismissed and avoided her days before. Their perceptions were as superficial as the compound concealing her birthmark, based entirely on appearance rather than substance. After an hour, having made her point to herself, if no one else, Eleanor departed. She directed her carriage not back to the Blackwell estate, but to the mine where Nathan would be concluding his day's work. She found him in the main office, reviewing reports with Thomas Riley. When she entered, both men looked up, and both froze in momentary shock. "Eleanor," Nathan said, rising slowly from his chair, his expression one of confusion rather than pleasure or admiration. "I needed to see you," she said simply. Thomas, sensing the privacy the moment required, excused himself quietly. When they were alone, Nathan approached Eleanor, his eyes searching her transformed face. "What is this?" he asked softly. No judgment in his voice, only concern. "An experiment," Eleanor replied. "A cosmetic compound that conceals the birthmark." Temporarily, she watched his reaction carefully. "What do you think?" Nathan studied her face, then shook his head slowly. "I think you look like Eleanor wearing a mask. It's skillfully done, but—" He hesitated, choosing his words with care. "It feels as though something essential is missing." His honest response brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. "I visited the Silver Palace today," she admitted. "I wanted to know what it felt like. To walk through the world without being defined by my appearance." Understanding dawned in Nathan's expression. "And what did you discover?" "That people are predictably shallow," she said, with a small, sad smile. "They listened to me, Nathan. The same people who have avoided my gaze for weeks suddenly found my opinions fascinating, my presence desirable, all because my skin appears unblemished." Nathan reached out, gently touching her cheek where the birthmark lay hidden. "And how did that make you feel?" "Powerful at first," Eleanor admitted, "then angry, then sad, and finally—" She took a deep breath. "Finally, I realized that I don't want to be accepted conditionally. I don't want respect that depends on concealment." Her voice strengthened with conviction. "If people cannot see my worth with the birthmark, then their opinion when it's hidden means nothing." Nathan's expression softened with pride and understanding. "The birthmark isn't you, Eleanor. It's simply part of you, like the silver in these mountains is part of Nevada. Those who can't see beyond it are blind to what truly matters." "I know that now," Eleanor said. "In a way I never did before." She reached for his hand. "Will you—" "And come back to the house with me? There's something I need to do." The ride back to the Blackwell estate was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. As dusk settled over the mountains, Eleanor led Nathan to her rooms and closed the door behind them. She moved to the washstand and poured fresh water into the basin. "I wanted to know what it felt like," she explained as she dampened a cloth, "to be seen as others are seen. And now I know." With deliberate movements, she began to wash her face, the compound gradually dissolving under her ministries. "But this isn't who I am." Layer by layer, the concealment washed away, revealing the birthmark beneath, the deep burgundy stain that had shaped her life in so many ways, both limiting and strengthening her. When she had finished, she turned to face Nathan, her face clean and bare, the birthmark fully visible once more. "This is who I am," she said softly. "All of me, the marked and the unmarked, the visible and the hidden. Can you accept that?" "Truly." Nathan crossed the room and took her face gently between his hands. "Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I see you. I've always seen you. The birthmark is part of your story, but it's not your whole story. It's not even the most interesting chapter." He leaned forward and, with infinite tenderness, pressed his lips to the birthmark. A gesture so accepting, so reverent, that Eleanor felt something long knotted inside her finally release. Tears spilled down her cheeks as years of shame and self-doubt began to wash away, cleansed by the simple power of being truly seen and fully accepted. "I love you," Nathan said, the words natural and unforced. "Not in spite of who you are or because of who you might appear to be, but simply, completely for who you are." Eleanor's hand rose to touch his cheek, mirroring his gesture. "And I love you," she replied, the admission both frightening and freeing, "for showing me how to see myself through new eyes." Their kiss was different from the tentative exchange. On the ridge, deeper, more certain, a seal on the transformation that had occurred between them and within them both. What had begun as a business arrangement, A marriage of convenience between a silver baron's son and a woman with an unsightly birthmark had evolved into something neither could have anticipated, a love built on genuine partnership, mutual respect, and the courage to see beyond surfaces to the true worth beneath. In the days that followed, Eleanor did not attempt to conceal her birthmark again. She moved through Silverton with head high, attended the Mine Owners Association meetings with confident authority, and worked alongside Nathan to implement their vision for the Blackwell Walsh enterprise. Some still whispered behind their hands when she passed, and Margaret Thornton's circle remained coolly distant, but these rejections no longer held power over her. Maxwell Blackwell, upon his return from Carson City, reviewed their proposal with skeptical attention, questioned their projections with ruthless precision, and finally, grudgingly, acknowledged the soundness of their plan. While he never explicitly approved of the personal dimensions of their relationship, his acceptance of their business partnership represented a significant concession from a man unaccustomed to compromise. 3 months after the wedding that had begun as a business transaction, Nathan and Eleanor stood together on the ridge he had shown her, their private sanctuary above the valley. The winter sun cast long shadows across the snow-dusted landscape, the mine operations visible in the distance, smoke rising from the newly rebuilt processing shed. "Your father approved the new safety protocols today," Eleanor said, her arm linked through Nathan's. Reluctantly but completely, Nathan smiled. "He's beginning to understand that innovation doesn't threaten tradition. It ensures its survival." "Much like our marriage," Eleanor observed thoughtfully. "What began as necessity has become something neither of us anticipated." "Something better," Nathan agreed, drawing her closer against the winter chill. "Something true." Eleanor rested, her head against his shoulder, the birthmark visible and unremarkable in the fading light, no longer a brand of difference, but simply part of the woman who had found unexpected happiness in the silver mountains of Nevada. "They say silver reveals truth," she said softly, "that it reflects what truly exists without distortion." "Then we are wealthy indeed," Nathan replied, "in silver and in truth." As they stood together on the ridge, overlooking the empire they were reshaping, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from strangers bound by contract to partners united by love, from a marked woman and a reluctant heir to two people who had discovered that true worth, like the richest silver veins, often lies hidden beneath the surface, waiting for those brave enough to seek it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.